It could be anything.
That's such a...
waiting to say that. I'm like, wait, is somebody going to say it? Let me just say it right now.
You know that Spider-Man meme where it's like 3 Spider-Man?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's like, what do you want to do? You pick an idea.
What is up, you guys? I am so excited for this episode because we've got a special guest today. But first, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Vicky from C'est La Vic. I'm a sneaker artist based out of San Francisco. And of course, I've got with me my co-host.
I'm Ann Duskus of Studio Duskus. Welcome to our podcast.
Welcome.
We're like so stoked today to have a special guest.
Yes, we've waited a long time for this.
We have.
Mm-hmm.
We're like looking at each other like, who's going to introduce this special guest? Okay, so he's a dear friend of ours. His name is Vaughan. I'm going to pass the mic over to him for him to introduce himself.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for having me. My name is Vaughan Carman, and I'm a leather designer based out of South Holland with Ecco Leather, but I also do a little bit of everything. So, got no complaints. Life is good.
Life is so good.
That is amazing. You have the podcasting voice, like soothing. I would listen to this all day.
I feel like I almost have to match his energy.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, and like tone the F. Like, you are just like so extra right now.
We're like super hyper. Yeah, exactly.
Because we're so hyped to have you in the studio.
I'm just trying to keep my composure. I'm very excited as well. I'm happy to be here.
Yes.
So I thought today would be the perfect episode for us to talk about how you can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a really cool subject because just like collectively in this room right now, between the three of us, we've all done a ton of different random things that put us on our path today.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so maybe I'll just start by asking maybe Vaughan, let me just ask you, like, do you believe you can do anything?
Yeah, I would say so. Of course, to an extent, but I mean, you have to start somewhere and you have to try. And I feel like for me personally, it's been this journey of trial and error and like figuring out like, of course, like what I'm good at and what I enjoy, but you don't learn that unless you like give it a shot to begin with. So yeah, I think you can do anything. You just gotta figure it out, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think it's like taking that first step. Once you step outside your comfort zone, then you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. And then it opens up opportunity for the next time. And then you're like, oh, I can do this more often.
Yeah.
And when it works out, I mean, it doesn't always work out, but it's fun to try and it's better to not regret it.
Yeah. So maybe my follow-up question for you then, Vaughan, is have you always believed you can do anything?
Absolutely not.
Okay, let's dig into that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, it can be really daunting to like be doing one thing in one certain moment and then want to switch entirely to something completely new. So even having, whether you have the opportunity to do it or not, or you're just trying to do it yourself, like kind of building yourself up to do that can be a really painstaking task. So like figuring that out as you go, but also like taking the time and the energy to put into it can be a lot. So I think it's definitely just been like, you know, bit by bit, step by step. But yeah, especially when I was younger, it was like, just try your best. If you like it, you like it. And it's always kind of like grown from there, you know? Mm-hmm. But now I'm lucky to say that like I have a lot of skill sets. I do a lot of different things like every now and again. So it just kind of helps you in the long run be like, oh, okay, like I can try this. I'll be okay. It's not that scary, and just opens you up to like a whole new world of different possibilities and things you could do, you know?
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example of a time when you feel like you weren't sure if you could do something, but then when you were done with it, you're like, oh, I can do anything?
I mean, the biggest one I think is like just like applying to art school, because I figured out that like art, design, education is a possibility and a career path like super late. because up until then I was looking more into like marine biology and maybe even like political science or like traditional advertising. And then the teacher's like, oh, you should look into like art school programs and like kind of like think what you want to do with that. I was like, yeah, art school. Okay, that's a thing. No idea what it was. Was going to like basketball camps to try and get like D3 scholarships, and then ended up applying to all art schools and getting into a bunch and like picking the one that I wanted to go to. But up until then, it was like, I'm not getting into art school. I know nothing about art school. I know I like making stuff, but I don't know how I can turn that into like a career or just make something out of that. And of course, it's a process, but it's like one of the things you just kind of go for, and it worked out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wait, did you do art before you applied to art school then? You were focused on like basketball and all of that, but did you create things, make things on the side?
Yeah, like I did like, I drew on shoes a bunch in school, and in high school that's kind of like what my friends knew me to do. Like I would always do like custom shoes for like buddies or like friends of friends.
I need pictures.
Yeah.
I have not
At
seen
some point
any
we
of
will.
these. At some point, not
Yeah.
now, but at some point, we
Yeah.
need to see these. Okay.
I used to do like a bunch of like custom Vans.
Oh, yes.
And just like it was all like marker drawings and stuff. And then I got like, I was really into print, so I do like the same print over like a whole shoe or something. So I got really good at that in school, and then just put a bunch of pairs in the portfolio and did a bunch of other stuff, and then that's kind of what got me into art school.
That's
and then
awesome.
continued to do that through art school, and that was like kind of like funding like, you know, anything from like snack money to like books or like whatever. But it was nice, just like kind of figuring out what I liked, but had no idea what I was doing at the time. But yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. What about you, Vicky? Like, have you always believed that you can do anything?
Not until I decided to go into shoes.
So that's fairly recent, right? Would you say?
It's fairly recent. I always thought, you know, I could do things that I was already good at. And so anything I didn't know how to do, I'd be like, nah, I'm not made for that. You know, like I didn't believe that I could learn to do anything, or like if something was out of reach, that if you just worked for it, you could make it happen. Or you just have to set your mind on a goal no matter how far or like out of reach or how impossible you think it is. But then if you believe it enough, you can make it happen. And it's only been these past couple years that I truly believe that.
Yeah. And I feel like part of the struggle for us is, or maybe for most people who don't believe they can do anything, is having something happen in their life that would help them believe or trust that they can do anything. And I think, you know, you and I have both talked about in a couple of our previous podcast episodes, as far as how we were raised in a Chinese family growing up. And, you know, traditionally, you know, what we would love to do, you know, like as far as like doing art or, you know, making crafts, you know, that was always sort of like, oh, that's like fun stuff, you know, she'll outgrow it. That's not a career path sort of thing. And so for me, I think growing up, like as a kid, as much as my parents nurtured me and provided opportunities for me to try different things, I just never grew up in a household where they encouraged you openly, like verbally, that like you can be anything you want to be, you can do anything you want to do. You know, it's always like, oh, here are all the fun things you can do, but then like, you know, focus on your academics, you know? And so I, growing up, I didn't believe I can do anything. And I think I'm trying to figure out like when exactly that like switch flipped for me. And I think it was probably when I went to art school the second time. And for our listeners who are curious why I went to art school 2 times, please check in with our mental health episode. And there we sort of like touch on, you know, what happened in my life prior to me being here today. And so I think it was only when I started going to art school the second time, that was when I realized and started to believe that I can do anything. And I think, leading up to that, it was because I sort of went through some personal trauma that that kind of shook me to my core, to where I realized that I need to, like, my life is about me, like, and what I need to do to sustain, like, my mental health and just like my physical self. And so until like I realized that, I didn't really feel like the urgency or the motivation to believe or to have like to value, myself enough to where like I know I can do anything. And then and I think it was from that point on where, like, once I started to believe in that and I started working toward, like, I'm just going to do anything I want to do because I know I can do it. And once I started believing in that, then, like, my life started changing, because, like, there's no longer this, like, thing or in the back of my head that's hindering me from pursuing something I'm thinking about. It's just like, okay, just do it. If you fail, you fail, whatever, move on to the next thing. And so I think up until this point, I feel like I've been able to accomplish what I've accomplished so far because I started to believe that I can do anything. And I mean, like, it's really strange, like, how powerful that is and how empowering that is for myself when I started believing in that. Because there's a part of me that also believes that, like, yeah, I'm, like, turning 40 this year, but, like, if I wanted to be the president, I can be the president. Like, it's, like, a really weird shift, but it's, like, really positive.
It's crazy how you came from this really low point in your life and had to overcome this hardship in order for you to feel that empowered that you can do anything, because you overcame something, that's really big and traumatic in your life. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think finding yourself, but also, like, your self-confidence is, like, one of those continuous journeys that doesn't have an end point. So when you find that, like, little switch where you're like, oh, this is what it feels like to, like, just be in a vibe where you don't care what people think to an extent, you're just, like, doing what you want to do, it really can change, like, how you see things and, like, how that can impact, like, how you handle situations. It's just, like, one of those moments where you're like, oh, wow, it was that easy, but, like, you don't know it until it happens.
Yeah. What about, Vaughan, like, for you, like, again, like, Vicky and I grew up in a Chinese family. Can you sort of, like, share with us and walk us through, like, what it was like for you, like, growing up in your household that's very different from ours, and sort of describe what that's like for us?
Yeah. I mean, I think I was, like, really lucky. My dad's side of the family is from New Brunswick, New Jersey. My mom's side's from Newark. And my dad's side, I think, comes from a line of like black professionals where they worked their butts off and did a bunch of, like, really amazing things. Like, my grandfather was a drummer, and he had the opportunity to go be drummer for Count Basie, I believe, at the time, and then turned it down to stay with his family and take care of them instead of just going on tour. So he became a police officer and then became the first black cop, I believe, for the city of New Brunswick. And that rolled over into impacting our family because my uncle became the first black fire chief in New Brunswick.
That's
my other uncle
incredible.
became the first black school teacher. My dad became, like, the youngest councilman at the time in New Brunswick history. And that's just in our family, like, nuts. And on my mom's side, my mom's side was, like, really into tennis because my grandfather played tennis, and that trickled down to my aunt playing tennis, and that ultimately ended up with me playing tennis. But I didn't know it until, like, maybe, like, a couple of years back. My grandfather used to train at the same spot as it was Althea Gibson.
Wow.
Up in, like, upstate New York, and, like, also in like Flushing, Queens at these like country clubs, and he would like take the train from like Jersey up to these clubs into New York, and it's just like all this stuff kind of like trickles down. Like on top of that, I didn't know, but like I got to meet my great grandfather when I was like really young, and we still have like I still have a bunch of really good memories with him and my great grandmother. But up until I went to design school and was in the apparel department, I had no idea that he was a tailor.
So cool.
And you know, you think about like family lineage and like how like kind of like family history like finds itself within itself. I'm like, man, it really found a way again. So I was really lucky to have like a very supportive household of just like really successful Black men and women.
I have a terrible joke, which is saying it runs in your genes.
Right. But no, like it's exactly that.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to that they still, you know, they still support me to this day. They supported my move abroad. They supported all my gigs across the country and all the back and forth moves and figuring stuff out. So yeah, just really lucky being able to do what I do. I think that's one of the reasons why I feel like I'm able to do like anything from time to time. You know, I have that support system and like really good family and really good friends and, you know, people like yourselves. Like it's very much a community mindset, you know. And I'm very lucky and like blessed to be able to say I have that.
You spoke about moving abroad. What did you think when you made the decision to move to Holland?
Yeah.
Were you scared? Were you like, did you think that you could just do it? Or, you know, what was the mindset going in? And then what's the mindset being there for a while now?
I mean, like, very naive when I look back on it because it was, I moved in end of August 2020, and, you know, that's like what would be the start of the pandemic. I was like, okay, well, I don't have a job in the States. They're offering me a job in Europe. I'm going to go. And my parents were like, oh, well, like, you know, is the money good? Like, are you good? I was like, you know what? We'll figure it out. It's better than just sitting at home because, like, that's the last thing I want to do is just sit because I'm not good at sitting still. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I'll go. And it seemed really cool. And, you know, it's been a really good experience. And, you know, it's not every day where you can say that you know, you're just a kid from Jersey who moved to the Netherlands to study leather design and like work with a company that works with a bunch of brands and creative individuals. And next thing you know, you're traveling across the country, like educating folks, showing people what you do, making stuff for people. It's really a very interesting space. And I think I really have some of the best coworkers that I've ever met, you know, really talented people that are just nuts at what they do. I think the move was hard, but I didn't know how hard it would be until, you know, like a year in, 2 years in now. But that's like any move, you know. Like we were talking about like you moving from like Toronto to the States. Like that's like a big move too, you know.
You don't know what to expect, but you're like, it's okay. I'll figure it out when I get there.
No, exactly.
Yeah, I get that. It's crazy.
Yeah. So Vicky, like, based on like what you're doing now currently, right? Like if we were to talk about how we can do anything, because I think that's like sort of a major part of like our everyday now, right? Because you and I both run our own business, and do you think about that, right? You know, because like on the daily we're like talking about like, okay, we have to, how do I respond to this prospect? How do I answer this client's question? You know, and I think a lot of that coincides with we can do anything, or we forget that we can do anything, because I think sometimes there's that sentiment of like we second guess that we can do anything, because, you know, when we think about like how we should respond to something, you know, and it's like, wait, why am I second guessing how much I'm charging this person? You know, because like I know like I'm capable of more. I know there's a greater possibility. I know I can be this thing I want to be. Why am I letting this person influence how I think about how I run my business? So can you sort of touch on like how this affects your current state of mind?
I think it's like overthinking. You know, when we think about you can do anything, it's such a simple philosophy that we forget. Like, if we just dialed everything back and looked at every single situation and analyzed it, it's a very easy yes or no. I want to do this. I don't want to do this. This brings me joy. This doesn't. And even like recently, I was talking to my little brother, who I kind of see like a younger version of me because we grew up in a very similar household and a similar culture. And he's worried about all sorts of things. Like, what am I going to do in life? How am I going to find money? How am I going to do all this? And I think that I see that in myself when I'm running my business because I'm just worried all the time. Like, when you're stressed out and you're worried, then that takes away from the fact that if you just put your head down and did what you loved and created what you loved, things would fall in place. And that's usually how life is, but we just overcomplicate things. It's like we go from being a kid and very carefree to this stage where we're like transitioning into adulthood, and it's like freaky, it's scary, overwhelming, all those feelings. And we forget to just have fun and let things happen, let things come into your life. Like, because when you say no, then a new opportunity comes up and you're like, oh, well, this is the path. Like the lights along the path kind of light up. Whereas when you have too many options and you're overthinking it all, you're like, I don't know where to go. I'm lost and confused. Yeah. So I think it's like this episode in particular really gives me that, like, it reminds me that I do need to simplify things a lot more. And like, yeah, we can do anything. Yeah. We were just talking about this. Like, we didn't think we could do a podcast. We're like, how many episodes in, you know? I didn't think I could be on social media. Hell no. Yeah. Like, yeah. I am so camera shy. I don't know how to like pose in front of a camera and take pictures and record myself. Yet we are 2 years in, you know? And it's like the more you do it, you get to a point where you're so far in and you look back and you're like, that was young me saying that I couldn't do it. This is new me and I am doing it. You know, like, yeah. So that's how I feel.
I feel like, okay, so can I just get on record and say, okay, so like Vaughan here is in his 20s and you're in your 30s, like early 30s, and I'm about to head into my 40s. But it's like, no, but like when I think about like us being in different stages of our lives right now, you know, I feel like, remember the other day I was like, oh my gosh, Vicky, I am becoming such a grumpy old lady. You know, like everything bothers me, you know? And I think it's like, it's exactly to your point. It's like, I don't know if you remember the quote that I loved and I posted about it. And it says, a creative adult is the child that survived. And I am obsessed with that because, and I think about that all the time now because like, I think about like, okay, why are you being grumpy right now? Like, would you have felt this way with your younger self? Like, it probably wouldn't have bothered me as much, right? Because I think it's like inevitably with life experience that you start to become more particular with certain things. And I think it's a conscious effort to like not allow that to sort of dictate how you move forward. But it's like, it's a constant challenge and this constant struggle. And yeah, and I think like, you know, part of what we do, you know, again, like, podcasting, being in front of the camera, you doing YouTube, me considering doing YouTube, you know, all these things. It's like people look at us and they're like, oh, you guys are so great, like you're so comfortable, or like, have you seen the 100 takes that we did, you know? And it's like, you know, people don't like, they only get to see the best side of it. And that's why like sometimes we love sharing the bloopers because we're like, oh, we're so silly here, like it's so funny, like we love it, but it's like we would never air a whole episode of that, you know? And so I think it's like getting comfortable with the uncomfortable is like, I love that we have this like to share with, you know, because I think like if it's more like one-sided, only like one of us in the studio believes in it, then it's harder for us to push each other to go outside of our comfort zone. And so so I think this like just us being in this round table right now, it's like it's really like interesting for me to kind of hear everybody's perspective. Yeah, Miss Grumpy over here.
No, it's great. What you always say that I love is like, I don't really give an F. Like, I don't care anymore. You know, anything that like makes me uncomfortable. If I think on the flip side, it's like, I don't really care about it. So I'm not going to let it affect me or stop me from doing something that I really want to do. Cause as you grow older, you realize like, I don't care. I don't care what
like,
people
if you think about it this way, like, right, when I'm 60, would I care? Probably not.
Yeah.
So like, just do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, oh, that was so silly when I was 40. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like something to laugh at when you look back on it. Yeah. But
I had a question actually.
Yeah. What's
So
that?
on this topic of like you can do anything, I feel like it would be such a miss to not talk about how you guys are like just like educating this next generation of how they can go about doing anything. You know, you're both creatives, you're both entrepreneurs. Like honestly, you're like the podcast is like a base example of showing people, but it also teaches people through teaching. So it's like this like educational method where you're showcasing your skill set, but also talking about what you do to this like whole new generation of people who are trying to figure that out. So I wanted to ask, like, you know, how does it feel to be in a position of this like new realm of like educators without being traditional educators?
You go.
I was gonna say I'm gonna pass it on to Anne, but like it's so.
What an honor, first of all. Thank you.
What a big like hat you've laid onto our heads. Because I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And like it's very unintentional because this whole podcast is just about us sharing our journey and, you know, us being open about what we're going through. And if that resonates with somebody else that's listening, then that's amazing. But yeah, I'm almost intimidated to be like, I'm educating other people because the truth is I don't know what the heck I'm doing most of the time, right? But just like sharing our experiences and hoping that somebody out there feels the same way, or they're thinking about doing something and then maybe they're scared and they don't think they can do it, and it's just really saying like, if we can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think part of that is also like, maybe it doesn't really need a label, right? Of like, oh, like you're an educator, because, and I think to Vicky's point, you know, I don't always think about that, you know, when I'm offering like something that's per se like educational, because it's really just like, oh, I want to share what I know in this moment in time. Oh, this topic seems really fitting, you know, at this moment in time, and even the whole thing about like me teaching master classes online, you know, during the pandemic, it wasn't like, it was never planned. I never thought I would teach a class, you know, become like a teacher, you know, quote unquote teacher. And because it's like, who am I? Like, who would ever want to listen to what I have to say? And it was like, me teaching master classes was a result of taking inspirations from my friends or my followers who wants to learn certain things from me, you know? And it was sort of like them like inquiring and asking if I would teach those things that sort of led me to teach like those classes. And so it was never like my, like to your point, Vicky, like my personal intent to become an educator. It sort of just evolved like and happened organically. And I think, and I think that's lovely in the sense that like, yes, I didn't put like a label on it originally. It was just like, oh, I want to do these things. I want to share these content, and it happens to be helpful to other people. Then I feel like that's more aligned with what I will want to do, you know? Because I think, you know, again, like if our listeners has listened to like some of, you know, our previous episodes, you know, I spoke often about how I've never been academically like driven, you know, growing up. And so I have always been that child that learned very differently from the traditional way of learning, you know? And so I think And so I think, for that reason, I don't necessarily feel like we need to put a label on like how we learn and who's teaching and who's doing what. It's more about like, here's some open source knowledge. Take it if it's helpful for you. And, so.
And I think
like
like it reminds me, we were talking about it over dinner yesterday. It just gives you a greater purpose almost to share what you love to do with other people. And it opens up like what I found is it opens up the community so much. Used to be on Instagram, I would post finished products. Like, this is what I sell, this like buy my stuff. And then at some point I pivoted to, oh no, let me show you how I make this. Let me show you the behind the scenes and everything that goes into it. And maybe one, you'll appreciate what I do more, or two, maybe you'll pick up a paintbrush and you'll want to start painting on shoes. And immediately, like, you can feel people are more interested and more engaged in what we're trying to do and what we love to do and share with the world, right?
Yeah.
And like, do you find that, Vaughan? Like, that's something that I know you said you were trying to like kind of pivot towards, like making it more accessible to people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, both of you hit the nail on the head. I think that, community is the byproduct of education, but also education is the byproduct of community.
Mm-hmm.
So they have this like really nice symbiotic relationship between the two of them. But yeah, it's definitely something I've been thinking about for like the past, 3 years now, writing about it, talking to colleagues, friends, coworkers about it. I really think there just needs to be a shift in how we go about not necessarily like learning, but how we think about learning accessibility. Because there's always going to be different levels of how people learn, but there needs to be more access to resources so people can learn in their own ways. I think for me, that starts with like how libraries function and library systems, and that's kind of like the space that I kind of want to explore more in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're just like incredible resources that offer so much that people don't even know about. Like, for example, the Philadelphia Library offers instrument rentals to high school students. And
Whoa.
like you can rent or borrow a violin, a cello, a
That's
saxophone. I think they even have like keyboards or like pianos that you can like borrow. So like if you're taking like music courses but you can't afford an instrument, the fact that you can borrow one, rent one, check one out, and practice is incredible because that's not common everywhere. Or even like museum programs that offer like student centers within their programs or in their library programs. I was just at the Los Angeles Library and it blew my mind because they not only have like an archive section and a rare book section, they have just 7 floors of different categories, from finance to economics to art and design to culture to historicals to fiction to manga. Like anything that you would want to learn about, they have. But they also have like their digital resource and like how you could like interlibrary loaning systems and stuff. And that's another thing that I wish people knew more about, where if they don't have something you want to learn about, you can get it from another library, shipped to your local library. And it's like things like that should be more accessible to more people, especially in smaller cities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like our generation, everything is very like all virtual and on the phone and on the internet. I feel like there's that wealth of knowledge in the libraries that we've forgotten about. And it's so crazy that you said that there's so many resources out there that are untapped because we don't care to look in those places anymore.
Yeah.
So I haven't been to a library since I graduated school. Like, it's been a long time.
Yeah, but then to your point too, like, how do we sort of like learn in the present? And I think that's, part of why like we haven't been to a library, because I think like, Vaughan happens to have like, he's like, you're really passionate about like libraries and like physical books, but the reality is like part of like, accessibility is being able to just like turn on your internet and like go to YouTube and
Exactly.
like find something you want to learn. And I think that sort of like when you remove all the barriers, it's like, okay, I don't have to hop on a bus to go to the library and then, you know, go check out a book, or, you know, like you can literally like be in one place and like learn 5 different things, you know, just by turning on your like computer. And I think there is no wrong way about learning, you know, and I think like, again, like going back to our topic of like, you can do anything. You can by learning anything on the internet, you know? And so, so I just think like we have like zero excuse, you know, like on like why we don't believe that we can do anything, you know, when in fact that we could. But again, like I feel like a lot of that is sort of as a result of your personal experience on whether or not you're quite there yet, you know? So, yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I have one question before we wrap up this episode. Is if there was a collaboration between Vaughan and Studio Duskus and Sejlovic, what do you guys think that would look like?
It could be anything.
That's such
I'm waiting to say that. I'm like, wait, is somebody going to say it? Let me just say it right now. Like,
that was not set up. That was Ann's like low-hanging fruit.
like Vaughan would say, I'm a ham and a half.
Ham and a half.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like between the 3 of us in this room, it would take us days to figure it out because we would,
Weeks.
Oh, right? Okay, that's
Right?
what I'm saying. It would take a while because we
Yeah.
want to do everything.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
There's so much to tap into
Yeah.
because it's like, you are so multi-talented. You are so multi-talented.
You are so,
You are so
Thank you.
multi-talented.
Yeah, but that would be insane.
It would be
So-
fun.
I feel
Yeah.
like this is the point where it's like, you know that Spider-Man meme where it's like 3 Spider-Man?
yeah.
It's just like, it's like, what do you want to do? You pick an idea. You pick, like,
I
is
love
that-
that.
I know.
I love that. A little bit of everything.
A little
Yeah.
bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it would be, honestly.
Yeah.
A little bit of everything.
That would be so cool.
Okay, Vaughan, before we go, can you tell our audience where they can find more information about you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm on Instagram. It's my first name, VAUGHAN _ Carman, CARMAN. Fun fact, my first name is my mom's side of the family's last name. So my name is 2 last names.
I know that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
So my mom's side's the Vaughns and my dad's side's the Carmen. So
Oh, that's so cool.
shout out to them.
Shout out.
And then I have a website. It's also just like my full name, and sometimes I write articles. Sometimes I post my work. Yeah,
VaughanCarman.com.
or either Vaughan Carman or VaughanLewisCarman.com.
Okay.
But yeah, one of the two.
If you watch YouTube, I'll link it below.
Yeah. Yes, please check out the multifaceted, multi-talented Vaughan Carman on Instagram. He's always posting and sharing about his current design life and all of his buddies' design life. So he's a beautiful being. Please check him
Yes,
out.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this with
Hey,
us.
I dabble.
Yeah.
Hashtag. But thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening.
See you next time.
How was that?
Hey, well done.
Hey!
Yay!
Oh my god.
Wait, what?
We
Can
get a
I be
still
your
of that.
teacher? Yeah.
And then my mom used to teach aerobics. That's how I have all my vintage gear, because they used to ship my mom the Nike catalogs and the Reebok catalogs like exclusively, because she was one of those like just like local fitness instructors. So she would like get all the latest fits. So I have all these like, she has some like wild like really like artistic like Nike 90s graphic shirt that make no sense. It doesn't look like a Nike shirt. It looks like a bunch of pinwheels. And she has like some wild gear. And